I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe and the dramatic retrial of his girlfriend Karen Reed. It's a case where the public has strong opinions, with each side seeing the evidence in only one way. And now a new jury must see if they can agree on what happened to John O'Keefe. Here's the story. The death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe remains clouded in uncertainty and disturbing silence after a night out with friends. He was allegedly dropped off outside of 34 Fairview Road. Yet, what happened next remains a haunting mystery. No one saw him enter the house. No one at the party recalled seeing him. Even more unsettling, no one reported seeing his body lying in the front yard throughout the night, despite claims he had been struck and left there. The snow fell heavily and still no tracks, no footprints, no cries for help. By morning, he was found bruised, bloodied, and lifeless. The eerie absence of witnesses and the strange quiet surrounding his death has split public opinion. Was it an accident, a tragic mistake, or something far more sinister hidden behind the walls of 34 Fairview? As the case unfolds in court, the mystery lingers. How could a man die so violently and no one saw a thing? That's still the biggest mystery in this case for a lot of people. And one of the reasons a lot of people have a lot of skepticism about the prosecution's theory here is because of all the witnesses, but no one actually saw what happened. No one saw him on the front yard that night. Now, I want to go back to the first trial when the lead investigator actually testified, former Trooper Michael Proctor, who was Trooper Michael Proctor at the time, here talking about his observations of the victim in this case.
He was banged up. Is that right?
Yes.
Then a person with the phone number 0095 wrote, "I thought he was drunk. Did he get beat up?" You see that?
I do.
And you wrote, "Nope." Is that right?
Correct.
Yet again, this is before 11 o'clock at night on January 29th, 2022, some 16 hours into your investigation. Is that right?
Yes.
So initially, you did think you knew what you had. A physical altercation leading to a death, correct?
Correct.
So it's interesting, like the first reaction of the lead investigator was this was some sort of an altercation. An altercation, and the victim is on the front yard of a home. But everything seems to change very, very quickly. And the question, and all of that brings us to the first question in our investigation tonight. So if he's found on the yard, why weren't the people at 34 Fairview investigated? Why didn't he go inside 34 Fairview? Why didn't he speak to everyone there? Why didn't he find out who was there the night before? None of that was really done because the investigation seemed to turn very quickly towards Karen Reed. So here to help answer that question that we have tonight, John DePietro, host and creator of Road Patrol Live, and Karen Reed supporter Kim Whalen. She's also known as Nurse Kim on TikTok and on YouTube. All right, John, why, if Trooper Proctor at the time is the lead investigator and comes across a body and he suspects a potential physical altercation here, why not interview the people at 34 Fairview? Why not go inside 34 Fairview?
That's a good question, Vinny. I mean, initially, maybe in speaking to the Canton police, he had no reason to believe that anything had happened. The Boston homeowner, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, when they woke up and came down that morning, because Brian Albert's sister-in-law, Jen McCabe, came into the bedroom and woke them up. When they came down the stairs, the Canton police were in their home. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. To answer the question about Michael Trooper Proctor, I think at that time, when you're talking about he's found there, and at that time they were also talking about a broken taillight, it seemed as though it were a hit and run with death resulting. There was no element that maybe there was someone in the house. We didn't know that Brian Higgins had been in that house. We didn't know that something had happened at the waterfall. It seemed pretty cut and dry that out inside in front of that house by the flagpole where John O'Keefe was found in a debris field full of taillight, that is what happened, and thus seemingly no reason to go in that house.
Let's take a quick listen to Sergeant Buchanan talking about this issue.
What steps did you take to, at that moment, to determine whether or not anybody in the house could have been involved in that possible physical altercation that you just described?
We interviewed the homeowner and 2 witnesses that were in that house.
You never went into the house, did you? On January 29th, at least.
I personally did not go in the house.
You did not secure that house or remove the occupants, did you?
Which day?
January 29th. I'm talking about the morning of January 29th.
I did not know.
You did not secure the yard as a crime scene, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't conduct any search of that house.
No, I did not.
You didn't take any photographs of the interior of that house.
I did not.
And I think this is another part of this case that has struck a lot of people, right? There's a dead police officer on a front yard. He's on the front yard, and at no point did someone like knock on the front door of the house and say, hey, there's a dead police officer on your front yard. Kim, why not? Why didn't they?
Yeah, Vinny, that's the $1 million question. And it has been the question from day one, from January 29th, 2022. If this was your house or my house or most other human beings' home in the United States of America, and a, police officer was found on our front lawns, 100% there would have been a search of that home. This is a non-negotiable, and if there were not the connections that there were in that police culture, then I believe it would have been an absolute search to make sure and ensure that everyone else inside that home was okay, was safe, and that there wasn't someone on the loose that could have caused fatal injuries to another human that was found on their lawn.
John, I want you to take a listen again. This is Michael Proctor from the 2024 trial talking about another text message that he sent.
Question. Oh goodness, the homeowner's gonna get some for this. Answer, nope. Next text, he's a Boston cop too. That doesn't sound like an explanation for your nope.
No, that's just saying he's a Boston cop as well. Mr. O'Keefe is a Boston cop.
And that's why he's not going to get any correct, Trooper Proctor?
Well, he's not going to receive any, sir, because Mr. Albert, the homeowner, had nothing to do with Mr. O'Keefe's death.
And you knew this 16 hours into your investigation?
Yes.
Okay, John, so there's two ways to look at this question. Like, did the fact that Brian Albert is a Boston police officer impact the way this case was investigated, number one? The second part is, even if it didn't, will the jury believe that the case was investigated differently because the homeowner at 34 Fairview was a Boston police officer? What are your thoughts on those two issues?
Vinny, you're the Canton police. They went into his house with Jen McCabe. They looked around. Nothing seemed to miss. Brian Albert, homeowner, Boston police officer, by the way, decorated Boston police officer. He said, listen, he never came inside. They talked to the different witnesses. No one had him inside that house. And so they couldn't place him in the house. Should they have maybe started doing a search around the neighborhood and going into some of the other homes? The Canton police said that nothing looked amiss. It didn't look like there'd been a fight inside. The witnesses that they did speak to, no one said that he came in the house. So to the police, in fairness, I mean, you need a reason of why you'd start searching from someone's house. Otherwise, why would you start searching other people's homes? I think the fact that maybe it was that he was a Boston police officer, but I think in this manner, it was someone that is known, that is trusted, and didn't seem to have anything to hide.
You know, when the story first broke, there were a couple of different things that struck me. And I remember hearing in one of the reports, a Boston police officer found on the front yard of another Boston police officer. And I was like, oh, boy, what happened there? And then I heard about his girlfriend had been drinking. So to me, those were the two competing headlines that I heard early on. But then that first one just evaporated. Like, it completely evaporated from the case, from the story as it evolved, and obviously focused on Karen Reed because she ends up getting arrested. Kim, are you surprised? And I'm wondering how much information came from the people in the initial interviews that John O'Keefe was supposed to come over the house that night. You know, that he was supposed to come over, that everyone was together the night before, right? If they're speaking with the homeowner, then the homeowner knows that he is directly inviting him to his house that night.
Yeah, Vinny, absolutely. And the other point there is when the Canton Police Department is telling us that there was no reason to search, that they walked in, well, they went to the foyer, right? And there were several people that were at that house the night before that had just left, in the case of Brian Higgins, after 1 a.m. And then he went to Canton Police Department to move some government issued vehicles. And then he goes home, but he's back there by 7 o'clock in the morning. And they're sitting at a table with whom? Jennifer McCabe, Chris Albert comes at a later time. Julie Albert is there. She wasn't out with them the night before. And it's Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and the homeowners, Nicole and Brian Albert. You have to also remember the other people that were at that house party, including Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel, weren't interviewed for several months, and to Colin Albert, who wasn't interviewed for years until later in that investigation.
Yeah, because even if you believed and you're investigating Karen Reed, you'd want to interview everyone that was there to try to gather a more complete story and more complete information. Like, there's all these people at the house, and did anybody see something? Okay, John DePietro, Kim Whalen staying with us. Coming up next, what does John O'Keefe's cell phone temperature prove in this case?
She clipped John O'Keefe. He fell backwards, hit his head, broke his skull, and there he lay.
Karen Reed is in the midst of the retrial of the century.
She is factually innocent. She's guilty.
There's something wrong in this county.
Come at me.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Just look at that touch from Trinity Rodman.
Saturday night.
When she is on the field, she changes the game.
Saturday night.
Saturday night is our night.
The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long.
Alexis tire spun backwards. She went backwards at least 70 feet. She clipped John O'Keefe. He fell backwards, hit his head, broke his skull. And there he lay at the corner of Fairview Road. On the ground, lying on top of his cell phone, alone.
On top of his cell phone. And this retrial has brought out some new witnesses, some new evidence on both sides. But for prosecutors, this was one of the first pieces of evidence that really struck me as being potentially compelling and telling a story. And it came from Ian Whiffen, the digital forensic examiner, talking about John O'Keefe's cell phone and the cell phone temperature. And I believe it's the temperature of the battery that it's recorded. But take a listen to this testimony. I think this can be potentially big for this jury.
By 37 minutes after midnight, we now know the device is already at Fairview. It's been at Fairview for approximately 12 minutes. And the temperature has continued to drop. It's now 72 Fahrenheit.
Mr. Whiffen, if I can interrupt you. At 12:37, when the temperature drops to 72 degrees, is that before or after the healthcare data stops for that evening?
That's after. At 1:36, it's dropped to 50. And then we have a large gap in the data, with the next record being made at 6 minutes after 6 a.m. when the temperature is 43 Fahrenheit.
Okay, so the temperature of the phone, and remember what Hank Brennan is arguing, that the phone was found beneath John O'Keefe on that front yard. Now, take a look here, and we've compiled this, the data from the phone regarding temperature. 12:13 a.m., 82 degrees. 12:22 a.m., 77. 12:37, 72. 12:45, 66. 12:53, 61. 1:07, 55. 1:36, 50. And then there's a gap of time to 6:06. It hits 43. And then at 6:14 goes down to 37 degrees. The phone is continuing to drop in temperature, which prosecutors believe is significant here. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation, which is, what does the cell phone temperature prove? And this is a temperature that seems to continue to drop. Still with us, John DePietro, host and creator of Road Patrol Live, and Karen Reed supporter Kim Whalen, also known as Nurse Kim on TikTok and YouTube. All right, Kim, you know a lot about temperatures and body temperatures, et cetera. You have that expertise. But here I am, I'm looking at a phone that continues to drop in temperature. To me, that is consistent with what prosecutors are saying, which is the phone never went inside. The phone was outside, and as a result, continued to drop. What do you believe this phone temperature data proves or doesn't prove?
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. I think that it is compelling for the prosecution to provide this to us, and in such an appropriate way of showing the degrees dropping until it reaches its lowest point after Kerry Roberts had found the phone and picked it up and put it in her pocket after 6:15. But where it gets concerning and a little bit dicey for me, Vinny, is that within the first 90 minutes of this recording of the temperature, we see 32 degrees has come off between 12:13 and 1:36 a.m. It goes down all the way to 50 degrees. But then we have this lull in data that it's not dropping at this rapid succession, but rather only 7 degrees. It drops in over 4.5 hours. I don't know how you're going to prove that, Vinny. And it also makes me wonder, is it in a part of a home, I don't know, like a basement, that may not be heated?
Let me ask you, John DePietro, what do you think this phone temperature data proves?
Vinny, I was in the courtroom when Ian Whiffen did that demonstration, and to me, you're exactly right. This was so powerful, and I'll tell you why, because it's so relatable. Every person in that courtroom had a cell phone on them, and every member of the jury had a cell phone on them. And I thought I saw with the jury kind of a light bulb moment where it made sense to them that it was a certain temperature in the waterfall, certain temperature inside her Lexus, and then a certain temperature outside. What I thought that made this so powerful for the Commonwealth was it did, as you said, it fit their narrative that John was lying on top of it after he got hit. They believe he had it in his back pocket. And then the warmth of his body, I mean, initially his body was 98 degrees. So initially the body kept it warm. But what this did to me right out of the box was eliminated that he went into the house. If he went into the house, there's no way it would have dropped that way. There's no way the temperature would have continued like that. They showed the temperature, what it was inside her car, what it was in the waterfall. I thought this was the thing that made this so valuable. Is it's not a foreign instrument, it's not a firearm, it's nothing like that. It's a cell phone. People are familiar with Find My iPhone, Find My cell phone, and the temperature everyone could relate to. I thought this was one of the most significant, easy to understand pieces of evidence the Commonwealth has put forward.
Kim, let me ask you about where we think the defense is going to go with their theory and their evidence, because we've seen a lot of witnesses, and there's a lot of pieces that you can take from all these witnesses. The snowplow driver, Lucky, didn't see a body out there on the front yard. but then later on around 3:30 a.m. saw a Ford Edge or some vehicle parked on the street. What do you think the defense theory going to be from their perspective on when John O'Keefe is placed or ends up on the front yard?
I believe, Vinny, that it may be that 3:30 time frame because there would have to be a reasonable doubt here that we have Officer John O'Keefe on a lawn, and his body temperature, as Mr. DiPietro said, is where he's losing so much heat, but him going from approximately 98.6 degrees down to 80 degrees is far more than what was lost out of that cell phone during a 4.5-hour time frame. So it is, in my opinion, that Officer John O'Keefe wouldn't have been on that front lawn for the extended time of 5.5 hours without frostbite, without any other signs of extensive hypothermia, as was indicated by Dr. Irene Scorti-Bello in her autopsy report.
John DiPietro, I'll give you the final word here. We have about 30 seconds left here. Your thoughts about the body temperature, cell phone temperature, how they relate to one another, and what it tells us.
Vinny, when they were showing the cell phone in the courtroom and they paired up with the Lexus, it was really strong. I was watching the O'Keefes. They were right in front of me, both Peg O'Keefe and Paul O'Keefe. And to them, they were watching John. They were watching John riding in the Lexus all the way to Fairview. Remember, he got out of the vehicle, 10 seconds, and then the cell phone never moved again after she backed up. I think if the defense is going to change that narrative, that it happened by the flagpole, they need to do it as quickly as possible.
John DiPietro, Kim Whalen, always appreciate your insight and your valuable time. We'll see you again soon. Big week coming up.
Thanks, Vinny.
Up next, was there time to plant evidence? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe, a man who was raising his sister's orphan children when he was found dead on a fellow police officer's front yard. His girlfriend, Karen Reed, has been charged with his murder. Here's the story. On the night Officer John O'Keefe died, a powerful snowstorm swept through Canton, Massachusetts, blanketing everything in a thick layer of white and erasing any trace of what truly happened. According to prosecutors, O'Keefe was dropped off at 34 Fairview Road after a night out, but never made it inside. By morning, he was found unresponsive in the front yard, battered and bruised, his body partially buried beneath inches of snow. The storm became an unforgiving accomplice, masking footprints, covering evidence, and silencing any sounds of struggle. Questions swirled as fiercely as the wind. How did no one see him? Why didn't anyone at the party notice a man dying just feet away? The snow may have softened the ground, but it hardened the mystery. Now, with a retrial underway and emotions running high, the storm that once covered the truth may also be what forces it into the light, one cold buried clue at a time. And some of those important buried clues were the pieces of Karen Reed's taillight, which have become a focal point of this case. And you've got one side saying this evidence was placed there. Well, I want to go back in time. Let's take a look at some video that a lot of people have talked about. Canton police looking for evidence begin with a leaf blower blowing off some of the snow that had fallen during this nor'eastern, looking for evidence. And at this point, I believe they found a piece of a cocktail glass. Take a listen to Lieutenant Paul Gallagher from Canton PD.
You see the end of the leaf blower?
I do.
There's an object just below it at like 7 o'clock. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you discover something in that area?
We did.
What did you discover?
It's a cocktail glass.
Was it, did it have any damage to it?
It did.
Describe that for us.
It was broken on the top.
Could you continue the video, please, Ms. Gilman?
Okay. That's the cocktail glass. The cocktail glass was taken from one of the bars, and John O'Keefe had it in his hand when he left Karen Reed's SUV. That part we know. But what Canton PD didn't find in that initial search with the leaf blower and looking around were any pieces of Karen Reed's tail light. And obviously the defense is saying that's because it wasn't there. It gets placed there by Trooper Proctor and others. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Was there time to plant evidence, right? You can have a theory that the evidence was planted, but was there actually time to do it? To take the evidence from the back of her SUV, the taillight, and place it at the scene before any of it was reportedly discovered. Here to help us answer this question, Paulette Lofton, Chief Public Defender for Oakland County, Michigan, and private investigator Jason Jensen. Let me begin with a question for both of you from your long, illustrious careers, because you both started so young. It's not that you're old now, but you started so young. That's why the careers are so long. Have you ever been a part of a case where evidence was planted by investigators? Paulette?
I have not. I have never seen a case with as many questions as this one. Obviously, in my 15 plus years of career doing criminal defense, I've done a number of trials, and I don't think I've seen a case which left me with so many questions as this one does.
Jason Jensen, have you ever been involved investigating a case where evidence was planted?
Well, you know, in the modern era with professional law enforcement and science, you know, where evidence leads to the conclusions, that's not common. But, I mean, me personally, I've never been involved in a case where that was the allegation. I've seen where, you know, there's been police brutality, there's been claims of prosecutor misconduct, but I've never seen a situation where evidence was allegedly planted. The only one that comes to my mind is like the O.J. Simpson case where they claimed that a technician took blood samples to the crime scene after drawing blood from O.J. But other than that, I don't have personal experience.
Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to walk through some of the evidence relative to this timeline so we can attempt to answer this question if there was, in fact, time in this case to plant the evidence. We begin with some testimony from Sergeant Buchanan talking about when the state police took possession of Karen Reed's SUV.
Did you ultimately make it to Dighton?
Yes, we did.
Do you know what time you arrived in Dighton approximately?
Approximately 3 p.m.
Did you notice anything remarkable about the SUV?
Yes, there was a large piece of red taillight cover missing from the vehicle.
How clearly did you see that missing piece? What's your level of certainty?
100%.
Okay, now let's listen to some more testimony from Sergeant Buchanan and Trooper Proctor. This is from the 24 trial for Proctor, obviously, about when the vehicle, the SUV, was brought from Dighton and when it arrived in Canton at the Sallyport at the Canton PD.
Do you recall when you arrived with the defendant's Lexus on January 29, 2022, what time you reached the Sallyport?
To the best of my recollection, it was 5:35 p.m. is when the vehicle was placed into the Sallyport.
The fact of the matter is, that was false. The car was not seized at 5:30, was it?
4:16 p.m.
Right. An hour and change, an hour and 18 minutes, hour and 20 minutes earlier. Is that right?
Yes.
Was it a typo?
Yes.
It was a typo. So you got the 4 wrong, you got the 1 wrong, and you got the 6 wrong. And those turned into 5 and 3 and 0, right?
They were typos, sir.
Fact of the matter is, you delivered that car to Canton PD, to the Sallyport garage, before a single piece of taillight material was ever found in this case. Trooper Proctor, is that correct?
Correct. It arrives at 5:31.
Okay, let's take a look. This is the SUV being brought to the Sallyport, and then obviously there are people there, and that's been a big issue in this case. And it arrives 5:31, 5:35 is it actually brought into the Sallyport. Now, let's take a look at the distance from the Sallyport to 34 Fairview. They're both in Canton. It's about 1.4 miles, depending upon how quickly you drive and what route you take, and if you catch a light or whatever, it's about 6 to 8 minutes or so. Could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more, depending upon conditions. Here's Sergeant Buchanan talking about where Trooper Proctor is in the Sallyport when the SUV's brought in.
Do you see Michael Proctor in this video?
I believe that's him, yes.
Which area is Michael Proctor walking to? The left rear or the right rear in this footage?
It appears if that's him, he's walking to the right rear of the vehicle.
Can we play this forward? And do you see Mr. Proctor's head above the SUV?
Yes.
All right, look at this timeline. 3 o'clock, Proctor seizes the SUV in Dighton. We've got 5:35, the SUV is inside the Sallyport. 5:37, Trooper Proctor is seen near the rear right tail light of the SUV in the Sallyport. Then 5:45 is the time that the search team finds the first tail light piece. And then at 6:20, the search team leaves. All right, Paulette Lofton, is there enough time to plant the evidence?
I think it would be a tight timeline, but I think when you compare it and look at all of the other evidence that we've been given in this case, I think it's plausible. We have missing footage from the Sallyport. Over 40 minutes are missing. The first trial, obviously, we know that the video was played in a mirror image, so it was flipped. There are so many questions around the video, missing video, the quality of video back when the car reached the Sallyport. In combination with that, I think defense is going to have a strong argument that, yes, the timeline may be tight, but in looking at everything, it's definitely a possibility.
Jason Jensen, was there time to plant the evidence here, or is the CERT team potentially in on it as well?
Well, that brings up a good question. If the CERT team could be involved, but eliminating, because obviously the larger pool of actors in a conspiracy, there's bound to be a weak link. Someone is going to, break under pressure and tell the truth. So I can't imagine that's the scenario. I would imagine that there was enough time to get out there before the CERT team and throw some pieces of glass in the snow. In theory. Now, in practice, that seems hard to believe, but with all the other evidence at play here, it really brings a strong case that there could be, a cover-up, an intent to blame an innocent actor for his death. Because one of the things that stood out to me from the beginning is them blaming the type of injuries on John O'Keefe's arm as being shards of glass, when in fact there are multiple angles indicating different timelines for that in a broader spectrum than just simply a pattern the size of the taillight. So it looks more like a canine than anything else.
All right, Paulette Lofton, Jason Jensen staying with us, still to come. Why all the butt dials?
How did you inadvertently call him?
Well, I don't know, because it was inadvertent.
So I have to explain that.
Well, it's kind of like a butt dial.
Lori Daybell, doomsday cult mom, convicted killer, and now defendant in yet another high-profile trial.
She didn't really care who she hurt.
This time for the attempted murder of a former family member.
Just makes you sad.
And again, she's representing herself.
What about the same problem?
Are you done? Or are you just going to keep...
Will this be the final chapter in the saga
of the Doomsday Cult Mom? The Lori Daybell conspiracy trial. Live coverage continues Monday morning on Court TV.
All that smoke and all those mirrors will not ever reach their burden. Not when every piece of this case was handled by a disgraced investigator with a motive to protect his friends, not when the physical evidence contradicts their very theory, not when their own medical examiner won't call this case a homicide. By the end of this trial, you'll conclude that Karen Reed is not guilty of hitting John O'Keefe with her SUV. There was no collision. She's the victim of a botched and biased and corrupted investigation that was never about the truth, folks. It was about preserving loyalty. You'll find that this case is the very definition of reasonable doubt.
Now, there are a lot of unusual facts and circumstances surrounding this case. We've been covering them for years. But perhaps the one that gets, the biggest reaction are the butt dials. The butt dials. Take a listen.
2:22 and 35 seconds. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Did you speak to Brian Higgins at any point between 1:45 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. that night?
No.
You say you inadvertently called him at 2:22 in the morning.
Yes.
How did you inadvertently call him?
Well, I don't know because it was inadvertent.
So I have to explain that.
Well, it's kind of like a butt dial.
And those phone records established that you and Brian Albert actually exchanged not one, but two phone calls at 2:22 a.m. that morning, at a time when you claimed you were in bed asleep, correct?
I have no recollection of any phone calls.
Now, when you were asked about this, and you were shown these records, that prior hearing, you had an explanation for what that 22-second call may have been and what the prior call may have been, correct?
Yes.
What was your explanation?
Well, I used a phrase that people commonly used as a butt dial.
So you think it's possible that you may have butt dialed Brian Albert for a 22-second call that you're not aware of?
I think it's possible that he could have been inadvertently called back, but I have no recollection of that, nor did I have any conversation with anybody.
What's your explanation?
I think I was going back and forth to the door. I was texting him. I think I put my phone in my pocket. I think I inadvertently maybe have called him.
What did you call it at the last hearing?
I believe I called it a butt dial.
And it's not just one butt dial, correct?
There could be multiple, yes.
7 butt dials in the course of 19 minutes, less than 20 minutes, correct?
That evening, I wasn't paying attention to butt dials or calls. I was going back and forth, listening to music, being with family.
And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Why all the butt dials? What's going on here? Still with us, helping us in our investigation, Paulette Lofton, Chief Public Defender for Oakland County, Michigan, along with private investigator Jason Jensen. I will admit it, I have butt dialed. I've butt dialed a lot. Sometimes I'll look and I say, how did I even, and I do butt face dials. Those are like the worst kind. I don't know how I do them, but I do. And they're to people I haven't spoken to in years, but are somewhere. So what do you make of this, Jason? What are your thoughts about all these butt dials?
Well, candidly, butt dials can happen, or I call them pocket calls because it sounds a little bit more appropriate. But the thing is, it's real easy for your screen to interface with you. You touch it, you put your hands in your pocket, you can touch it. The problem is here, it makes the defense case so easy that there was conversation between the actors involved that they are labeling as key in this conspiracy to blame Karen for this crime. So the whole thing is it sounds shady. How can you have so many butt calls back and forth and there was no conversations? And then you throw in the issue is that unless it's an open call for a very extended period of time, where's the voice message of just dead air of someone walking, or where is the the actuation of hanging up the butt call. So it just seems convenient to claim when, if it was a conspiracy, why didn't they just simply say, I was just checking to make sure they made it home and things of that nature? So it doesn't sound like a very good excuse, but at the same time, it makes the defense case pretty strong.
Yeah, and I've also received butt dials, but I remember specifically one I received as a voicemail message. Someone butt dialed, my voicemail picked it up, and then recorded. I don't want to tell you what I thought I heard in that recording. I'm just not going to. But Paulette, your thoughts about the so-called pocket dials?
It happened too many times. 3 different people are claiming that their phones made calls that they didn't intend to make. That's too much. This definitely helps the defense case, because if really nothing was going on that was nefarious, why wouldn't these people have admitted that they were calling each other? Like was just mentioned, we're just checking to make sure they made it home, or you left something here and I was calling to tell him that he left it here. The fact that there was so many just doesn't make sense, especially the testimony that I was sleeping and I have no idea how it happened. Lock screens have come a long way from what they were 10 years ago. Just touching it simply, it doesn't open your phone. You're going to need to use your fingerprint. There's facial recognition. You draw a design to get your phone open. It's not as though you can't even open your phone wearing gloves. So it takes some work nowadays to get your phone open to make a call. Maybe Jen McCabe, as she kept putting her phone in and out of her pocket, as she said, playing music and doing something else. But 7 calls in a short period of time, that just doesn't make sense.
Now, the other thing, Jason, that I think the defense has made a lot about is it's not just a butt dial, but a double butt dial, okay? So one butt dial to the other person who then returns the butt dial back. That's like, you know, dancing cheek to cheek or something. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. That, to me, that's what made this different, right? One butt dial goes out, but then a butt dial comes back. How's a jury going to take that?
I think for the most part, people are going to think it's nonsensical that you got repeating butt calls back and forth, like the butts really need to converse.
Yeah. Paulette, do you think that is the 0 to 10, how much impact would that butt-to-butt dialing have?
I'd say 8. That specific call, that's not going to happen. There was a conversation that was had, albeit it was short. I think it was 22 seconds. Something was discussed. That's too much of a coincidence. The jury obviously doesn't check their common sense at the door.
All right. Big thank you tonight, Paulette Lofton and Jason Jensen. Always a pleasure. We'll see you again really, really soon. This case has a lot of evidence. Physical evidence, digital evidence, eyewitness testimony, and of course, that expert testimony. And all of it's important. And prosecutors need it all to work to prove their case. If any of it comes up short, it could lead to reasonable doubt. That's why prosecutors need to make sure the jury is not left with any lingering questions. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.